Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Fulco, Agneta M. Schreiber Curator at the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts in Hagerstown, Maryland. And I welcome you to our debut of a new program called the Curator's Den, a bi-weekly program in which I explore different works of art from the collection that have intriguing stories to tell. But first, the museum wishes to thank its sponsor, Judy Wheeler, for her generous support of this program. Every 2 weeks, I will be featuring works of art that are drawn from the collection and that have been infrequently exhibited throughout the museum's past. You will notice that periodically I will be integrating this with another initiative that the museum has developed called Seldom Seen, or Artwork of the Week, in which some of these works will be tied to the content that I present in the Curator's Den. It is the museum's aim to place some of these works in an upcoming exhibition to run from summer to fall of 2020 and look at a variety of different cultures and objects represented in the collection. Today, I'm going to speak to you about a portrait in the museum's collection of the renowned woman Helen Keller. This portrait was completed by Augustus Vincent Tack in 1941. But more about Helen Keller a little bit later on in the program. First, let's talk about Augustus Vincent Tack. He may not be a household name for many of us, but he has an important place in the history of American art and its development. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1870, Tack studied at the Art Students League in New York City in the 1890s with the famous stained glass artist, decorator, and painter John Lafarge. John Lafarge encouraged Tack's studies as well as his creativity, and subsequently Tack became very closely associated with a colony of artists in Deerfield, Massachusetts, beginning in the early 1900s. Later on in his career, Tack would teach at the Art Students League and also at Yale in the 1910s. It was at that time that Tack came to the attention of the renowned Duncan Phillips. In the picture on the left, you can see a self-portrait of Augustus Vincent Tack seated in a large wicker chair in front of one of his very abstract paintings. And you will notice how much that painting contrasts with his official style of portraiture represented by his portrait of Harry S. Truman on the right, today in the collection of the National Portrait Gallery. Augustus Vincent Tack oscillated between two different styles during his career. However, for Duncan Phillips, he was more drawn towards Tack's abstract style. It's shown in the painting and in the self-portrait on the left. But Tack had to make a living, so he received quite a few official portrait commissions, including, as we're going to learn, the one of Helen Keller. A little bit about Duncan Phillips. He was the founder of the Phillips Gallery in Washington, D.C., one of the most important collections of modern American and European art in the United States, and in some regards also similar to the Barnes collection in Philadelphia. Duncan Phillips became a key patron of a great many modern American artists. You might ask yourself, how did Duncan Phillips' legacy connected to Augustus Vincent Tack find its way up to the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts? Well, this has a very interesting story. Let's begin with the picture on the left. This is another portrait that we have in the Museum of Fine Arts collection. A portrait of John B. Ferguson Sr., who was the chief architect and engineer for the Museum of Fine Arts Washington County's 1931 building. He also, during the 1940s, served as a trustee of the museum. When Mr. Ferguson went to New York, he met Augustus Vincent Tack in the mid to late 1930s. And in conversations with then director, Dr. Richard Medford, he brought Tack back to Hagerstown along with his work and helped facilitate an exhibition of his many paintings, drawings, and works on paper that were exhibited throughout the galleries of the museum. including some of the abstract works that you see in the right-hand side here of the self-portrait of the artist. In the center, we have the Hagerstown Daily Mail from November 13, 1938, in which a journalist for the paper reviewed the exhibition and provided the public with a glimpse onto this very exciting exhibition, which shared parallels with recent exhibitions held at the Phillips Collection down in Washington, D.C. Here is an example of one of his abstract works that's today in the Phillips Collection, called The Aspiration from 1931. This is a very radical painting for its time because it looked forward to abstract expressionist art of the 1940s. However, Tack was exploring this style in the early 1930s, which made him a very avant-garde artist. Now, we turn to Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born originally in Alabama, and as a girl, she did not suffer from being deaf or blind. That happened after an illness that we now believe to have been caused by meningitis at age 19. As many of us know, Helen Keller is most famous today as one of the first people to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree with her disabilities. She was an author, a political activist, and a lecturer. Early on in her life, she was supported by the likes of Mark Twain, the famous American author, as well as Alexander Graham Bell, who was responsible for taking the photograph of Helen and her lifelong companion, Miss Anne Sullivan. Graham Bell became friends with Helen Keller and, along with Mark Twain, helped to support her early treatment and care. Anne Sullivan would help Helen a great deal with learning how to overcome her disability, read, and express herself throughout her life. Keller campaigned for women's suffrage and labor rights. She also took stances on anti-military activities. She helped found the American Civil Liberties Union, and she was awarded with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1967 by Lyndon B. Johnson. Today, she is buried in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Now, returning to the Museum of Fine Arts, Washington County's portrait, I have done some new research on this painting, and having compared it with another very similar work in the Fogg Art Museum, part of the Harvard Art Museums in Cambridge, Massachusetts, preliminarily determined that the portrait on the left of Helen in the museum's fine arts collection is possibly a study for the work on the right that is more finished, in which Helen sits in a very large chair, almost resembling a European style throne, and in which she holds out a book, likely containing Braille that she used to read throughout her life. The portrait on the left shows the immediacy that the artist sought to capture in the painting. So fleeting qualities, including the blush in her cheeks, as well as the gray hair that's mixed here in the composition in the upper part of the painting. And also, he carefully and deftly contrasted the use of green against a dark blue background. This being a bust-length portrait, likely a study for this part of the portrait on the right at the Fogg Art Museums. The exact nature of this commission is not known today, but it is my belief that Augustus Vincent Tack, at some point in his career, had made the acquaintance of Helen Keller. Further research that I will conduct will likely turn up evidence in which these two persons are connected. But for the time being, we may presume that some sort of relationship existed between them. And, as always, trying to support himself, Augustus Tack needed to complete, as I had mentioned earlier, a great deal of official portrait commissions. The painting on the right was given to the museum in 1945, so 7 years after the 1938 landmark exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts in Hagerstown. Next week in our session, I will be exploring another painting as well as the continuing legacy of Augustus Vincent Tack in looking at a beautiful painting of the Buddhist goddess of mercy, Guan Yin, and her attendant, a gift from Tack to the museum as a result of his association. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you in our next installment of The Curator's Den. Take care for now.